And good night. Welcome again to another in the series of our town hall. Thanks for joining us. First, I'd like to apologize for our late start as we were having technical difficulties. We start tonight first by welcoming Mr. Arturo to the show. Arthur, you will do the proper introduction after our prayer. So without much ado, let's get first into our prayer so that the show can continue as smooth as possible. Let's bow our heads, please. Tonight we choose our Belizean national prayer. Because of times that we see ourselves in, it's most appropriate at this time. Almighty and eternal God, who through Jesus Christ have revealed your glory to all nations, please protect and preserve Belize, our beloved country. God of might, wisdom, and justice, please assist our Belizean government and people with your Holy Spirit of counsel and fortitude. Let the light of your divine wisdom direct our plans and endeavors, so that with your help, we may attain our just objectives. With your guidance, may all our endeavors tend to peace, social justice, liberty, national happiness, the increase of industry, sobriety, and useful knowledge. We pray, O God of mercy, for all of us, that we may be blessed with the knowledge and sanctified in the observance of your most holy law, that we may be preserved in union and in that peace which the world itself cannot give. And after enjoying the blessings of this life, please admit us, dear Lord, to that eternal reward that you have prepared for those who love you. Amen.
Amen. Good night once again. Good night, Dennis. Good night to our viewing audience. Good night to our guest, Arturo Lizarraga, President of the Belize Business Bureau. Certainly one of the foremost entrepreneurs in our country, a pioneer of the free zone movement in Belize, among other achievements. Let me say once again, good night and welcome, Arturo.
Right.
Well, tonight our topic, ladies and gentlemen, is whether or not an oligopoly in the banking sector of Belize is a good thing for the Belizean people. I want to pose that question to our guest, who is no stranger to economics and finance and the banking sector, and can shed some light on recent developments here in Belize.
Well, you know, we have to understand the origins of oligopoly and monopoly. Oligopoly is just an additional number or two. Instead of one, you become two or three. It's basically a cartel. So when you're talking about an oligopoly, you're talking about a cartel. And the cartel usually exerts its force through collusion. And that could be in a non-dollar sense, meaning through strategic marketing. It can be in a dollar sense through price fixing, where they can agree on a certain price. So the fact that we have a giant player in the house, where the bank has taken over another bank, and jointly is around 50%, is controlling 50% of the market. Not even Samsung, which is a large company, controls 30% of the market. In Belize, we have one banker controlling 30%, 50% of the banking market in addition to the port, in addition to many other things. Recently, getting $500 million from our government for a telecom that's overpriced and failing. So yes, it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing, and it's not going to bode well for Belizeans because that person then controls who gets finance and who doesn't, and therefore decides who will be a winner and who won't in the grand scheme of things, independent of our government. But we have to understand what makes this happen. How did it originate? The whole idea of monopolies come from the king. The king makes an agreement to share in the joint or the profit with the monopoly and then gives him sole rights so that they can extract, for example, the East India Company. In our case, in Belize, we had BEL, Belize Estate Company, that controls or owned most of the land and the business in Belize. So the whole idea here is that Belize now is ripe for antitrust legislation and fair market or fair competition legislation. Why? Because we've recently seen where government, again the crown, giving a few select Bakra Belizeans the chance to control butane price. And in fact, as always, the price never goes down. It becomes price gouging from the beginning, from the get-go. In the case of the butane company, they decided they have a gentleman's agreement, an agreement which a special agreement that will guarantee them the profits. But what have they done? Anybody who borrows in a bank normally would pay back the loan, and that loan, that percentage, is part of their equity contribution or part of their profits. In the case of the butane monopoly, they've added their profits in addition to the loan interest that they're paying. So they're double dipping. And in the case of the banking sector in Belize today, we can go ahead and we can without certainty know that financing will become more prohibitive, more expensive, and in fact, one of the hallmarks of the Scotia uh, organization was that about 30% of its fees, of its income, came from fees. So we would expect
Right.
that we'd have more fees being generated from this conglomerate or this cartel, because that's what it is. It's a cartel. It's now officially a cartel because it's more than one with one single controlling interest.
I think one of the things, Arturo, that our audience need to
I don't know if
appreciate.
that.
No, that was a very comprehensive
Good analysis,
explanation
yes.
of what exists and what has occurred. But I think one of the things that our audience would certainly appreciate knowing is how this affects them on the individual level. What does it mean to have uh, Michael Ashcroft's company, Caribbean Holdings, Belize Bank, now having this huge share in the banking sector market, and how that basically translates to the everyday person, the person in everyday life? What does it mean?
Well, it affects them immediately. Um, for example, we know it's no surprise that Scotia was taking a hit in terms of its non-performing uh, portfolio. And recently, as probably five years ago, Belize Bank was in the same position. Well, the banking industry as a whole had a lot of non-performing assets due to the slowdown. People don't quite grasp, and I think the government has hidden the fact that every year your per capita, the Belizean per capita for the last 12 years have lost 2% of its value every year, cascading downward. And they have never shown you that per capita decline, nor have they shown you the fact that the investment, direct investment in the country has declined considerably every year. In fact, you would note that it's hard to find real numbers on real GDP figures. For example, the the unemployment masquerade that we're only 10% unemployed. Right now, we know for a fact that we have 100,000 people unemployed. What is what is very important to recognize is that that is about 50-55% of Belize currently unemployed. Therefore, they won't be able to meet their loans, their mortgages, and it's, people think that it's only just going to be a foreclosure bubble bursting. It is not. It is all those people, for example, if you go to courts and you credit a television, you end up paying a $35 fee every time you miss a payment. In addition to the compound interest, if you get a washing machine, they combine it together so they leverage up and retch up the price. So it's almost like a 32% credit card fee that you're paying.
Right.
So what we have is that this person having 50% control of the market will now have the ability to choose, and that's one of the things that I keep saying. COVID brought clarity. It is now clear that we need Chapter 7, Chapter 11, Chapter 13 laws to protect people and businesses from predatory practices within the banking sector and the credit sector. It's not just the banks. The whole idea of the quick loans, the quick loan shark, the pawn shops, the consumer has no protection, very little protection. In fact, when somebody loses their property, the banks normally decide whether they're going to take it or give somebody who one of their preferred clients the first option. In fact, even the auctioneers tend to be on the slight side favorite. So we obviously need a huge amount of protection because we're now going into a storm of foreclosures and a storm of demand letters that the consumer, that 100,000 people who are in there biting their nails, wondering what they're going to eat tomorrow, will not be able to defend themselves. So it is incumbent that we have not just protection for the employees of the bank that has been taken over, but we need to protect all those consumers who have lost their jobs and who right now are under intense stress. In addition to this new thing called banking foreclosures and credit and loan demands, and what has been the practice over the last 7 to 10 years is that the court system has been working for these very same creditors and bankers, ratcheting up, taking people immediately to court and applying the pressures and making people's life very impossible. So I think that we need to address the whole idea of the need for protection of the consumers, for an understanding so that they could understand what they need to do to protect themselves and how they protect themselves. So this is not just a takeover. It is a very ominous, a very dangerous situation that can easily go awry. There are some quarters who in the opposition have rallied against or trying to say, okay, well, as we get in, we'll destroy the National Bank, we'll destroy it and put it away. But that they said the same thing about the free zone, and the same person in opposition became one of the most ardent supporters of the free zone system because he realized how much money it generated for government and how much employment it brought. And so I'm saying that that is the same thing that's happening within the opposition to the National Bank. It's not being used properly. But for example, there is no commercial bank. If you want to focus on the productive sector, there's no commercial bank that's going to take the risk and act as an exim bank for exports.
Right.
And if, for example, let's say we wanted to recapitalize all those loans, we can't go to the same bank to recapitalize it. We need another bank to refinance those loans. So let's say the new government gets $300 million and decides, okay, I'm going to help all these people who are hurting, and we're going to take over those loans from the banks so that their assets, their balance sheet becomes good, and I assume these loans and I will give them a grace period, so to speak, or I will build in the loan and I will extend it out so their payments are brought up front, and for a year or two they're able to pay their loans, and so when they become productive they can continue paying their loans. But that cannot occur without, or that cannot occur without occur in the absence of a bank. And therefore, what I'm referring to is the national bank. It cannot be central bank because that didn't happen as to why international Atlantic International uh, was closed down. Where did the banking system go wrong? Where did the central bank go wrong in that
Right.
endeavor? All that has to be brought to light. Another issue that we have to raise is why has Belize not been able to attract other banks? Is it that the central bank is playing backstop and trying to make sure to ensure that only a few people are in the banking system? All those questions we have to air out, and I
Well,
believe a commission of inquiry is necessary for us to clarify these
this is
issues.
what I wanted to put to you right now, Arturo, because here's the situation. We saw where the governor of the central bank came out almost like a cheerleader when the deal between the Ashcroft Group and Scotiabank was announced. Isn't it the responsibility of the central bank as the regulator to be in front of these things, to be there prior to any transaction being entered into, so that the interest of the people of Belize is served?
Well, I believe that the bank has played a very intimate role in the acquisition. Why do I say that? Because I understand that there were other people who were interested in acquiring it. But if you notice that the former governor of the central bank has referred to issues like the retain earnings from Scotia, and that's why in the beginning people are wondering how can he get this for such a low price when it was being sold at a high price. And I think what was happening there was the balance sheet being offered, including the retained earnings, because Scotia knew that it would be difficult for them to get their foreign exchange out of Belize, and therefore would have left it for the person who was acquiring the bank. So
Wow.
clearly, that situation needed more intervention, more intricate intervention prior to the sale. So this is not a surprise. Well, you also have to understand too, if Scotia is leaving, and I am almost certain that there are lots of portfolios that weren't being addressed that are behind in terms of the Scotiabank portfolio, in terms of payments. And so there is a lot of weakness within the banking system. And I believe that maybe central bank felt that the acquisition would have addressed those concerns. But let us go back a few years when the correspondent banking evaporated, and including for the bank that's the owner of the bank that's been acquired lost its corresponding banking relationship, and Scotia was one of the only places that you had adequate foreign access to adequate foreign reserves and correspondent banking. So I'm almost certain that we will still lose that correspondent banking relationship that Scotia has had. And so we have not solved the issue of the correspondent banking crisis. In fact, this government has failed for over 10 years to address that issue. But that issue is recurring even with the acquisition. So I believe that the acquisition excited the central bank because they figured it would calm the waters to a certain extent. And maybe in a sense it has, but I think it would have been beneficial to Belize to have another foreign entity which had correspondent
Entity.
banking acquire that entity.
Right. Now, the
No,
of course
before
we heard
but
from
before you go on, Arthur, we
yes.
I for some reason I want to try to break it down so that the people who are at home who might not understand all of the terminology that we are using right now can get a sense of what really is happening. And this is where we need to find a way to break it down so that the mom and pop at home who may not get everything, we have to put it down a little bit to their level. And I want to put it this way. You have one bank buying the other bank, but this bank that has bought the other bank was not able to get US currency. Therefore, what is happening now, when that bank who is not able to get US currency, and the only bank that for a long period of time was able to get US currency, which enable us to buy things from abroad, from outside of Belize, what may happen to us is that we will find ourselves in a situation where it becomes even more um,
Difficult.
harder for us to get the currency needed for us to do the trading, because we depend a lot on buying goods to bring into the country. And so what is
Well, I
happening
think
and what is,
Go
I
ahead.
think the people can see that the people can see that
no,
very very quickly because the people
no,
go to the
but
grocery
I'm saying
store and
especially mhm. You see, we are looking at, yes, we but I'm looking at especially some people who need to have it little written down a little bit. It is important for us to see that um, it is important for us to realize that we are in a very sticky situation right now in Belize, and that as individuals, we are being put in a position where, because we don't have jobs, we can't pay back banks. Some of you who are banking with Scotia might find that things will change rapidly. That is what we need to bring home to our viewers.
well, it's very clear to people who are going to their neighborhood store right now. Let's say they go to a Chinese grocery store, and the first thing they do is they pick up a bag of chips that was $1. Now it's 125, and they pick up an item, and it's almost like a 25% increase in all
Increase.
the items that are imported. So the foreign exchange crisis is already here upon us. That has no, that's not going to go away anytime soon. But it's compounded by the fact that we no longer have Scotia from Canada and the access to that foreign currency that we had before. So that door has been closed. One of the long term pivots that this country will have to do to avoid being buried like we did in the 1950s when we were devalued
Devalued.
is that we might need to turn to our neighbor Mexico and import directly from them. People don't know yet, but we re-export and export to Mexico. 49% of our re-exports go primarily because of the free zone, but a lot of our exports go to Mexico. So what we might need to do, instead of buying the refrigerator from the US, we'll have to buy it from Mexico. It's made in Mexico anyway. Instead of buying a Chevrolet in Texas, we'll probably have to buy it in Chetumal. And so I would think that the people, business people in Belize are very savvy. We have two borders, and so the exposure of the back and forth, people. It's not like other countries where international trade is a difficult thing for people to understand because they don't have close borders. In our case, we're a small country, and so we can pivot very quickly. So what I would think would happen if the trade in that nature increases, and if the new government moves ahead for a free trade agreement with Mexico, we will see the changing in the financial institutions, whereby we'll have Mexican banks here, and we'll have to have access to peso to make our reserves more resilient, because the bigger trading partner will start to shift, because if we can't buy from the US because we don't have the dollars, then we'll have to buy from our neighbors. So that is one of the long-term consequences of these kinds of maneuvers, that where we're shutting off the access to the US, that I can foresee evolving out of this kind of situation. But for the persons who are at home today and tonight, who are listening to the show, they know very well the consequence right now of the absence of foreign exchange. So having losing Scotia will just compound the issue even more, because those business people who would go to Scotia for US no longer can do so.
Glennis, could we get some of the concerns of our viewers, please? Let's hear what they have to say on the issue.
Um, I am not able. Wait, right now. All right. We have Nancy Paz and Shelley Gap saying that good night. We have Eric Ferguson. Much respect, Mr. Lizaraga. Well stated. This program should have been titled The British Oligarchy, better known as Michael Ashcroft, a good thing for the people of Belize. Um,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
uh, Shel Swaza said, severe negative trickle down effects. Um, Angel Darling, there is no interest of the people, but every time you try to do business with Belizean, you can't even bring in money to pay or buy business without they making all the introverts saying and making you feel like you're a criminal. Clean up or get out. Up the crap that's stopping us from getting investment into our country. And he goes on to look at everyone's hands are tied here except for the real wealthy. Um,
True.
but no one seems to sees the cause of all this, and so-called news people are filling everyone with COVID fear and propaganda. They're not taking time to wake up, and it will be too late. But now we have to buy with no money. Everyone talk to the states said that they can't something American dollars. It's a waste of time, and it is costing us too much.
Well, listen, guys, one of the things that certainly we have to look at is that we have four major banks in the country. We have Belize Bank, Scotia Bank, which is now being taken over, Atlantic, and Heritage. The bottom line is at this particular juncture, Ashcroft has direct control over the two largest banks, and he has influence over the other two because his law firm, Barrow and Williams, one of the major partners in that law firm, has major shares in Atlantic and in Heritage, which makes your categorization of the entire thing as a cartel, Arturo, very apt. One of the things that certainly we have to look at is that this takeover of Scotia and the resulting oligopoly that has been created, where there is really and truly no competition, but certainly collusion by virtue of the affiliations and direct interests, is that the cost of capital and the access to capital have all increased. It- Access to capital basically is going to be more difficult for business persons, young entrepreneurs who are seeking to start their businesses will not be as welcomed as they would have been had there been real competition in the industry, in the banking industry. And certainly we can expect higher legal fees. This is one of the things I want you to speak to, Arturo, because I don't think a lot of people in Belize understands exactly how the Belizean banking consumer is being gouged. Mortgages don't change. They are standard documents, but the legal fees are kept at a very high rate, even though the lawyers don't draft new documents. All they do is cut and paste names. Why is it that these legal fees attached to loans are kept so high?
Well, it's a collusion between the attorneys and the bankers, and there's the founding fathers of the American Constitution they were very clear about that relationship that that they refer to as a devil in the making. And once they take control, then democracy is lost. I do agree with you that there is where we need to legislate that a mortgage document should only be a small cost. It shouldn't be a percentage of the loan. It should only be maybe a $250 a document. It shouldn't be a 2,500 or in some cases $7,000 document as you were referring. But the
Right.
question on the real estate is that the issue, there are lots of issues about real estate. First of all, I know Mr. Ashcroft has been trying to sell the Aliyah units, and he's been pushing to have the PGIA open. And if you notice, Texas has recently relented on being open up. So Belize I don't believe we can afford another lockdown. So
Right.
I think it would have been a wiser thing to wait until the real tourist season takes over in November to allow, when we've already addressed our issues, that would have been ideal. But then politicians are forced by the people who pay them, and therefore they have to open up.
The
One
man
of
who's
the
buying the
issues
bank.
about the real estate,
The man who's
exactly,
buying the
and
bank.
the well, not just the bank. I think he bought a lot more than just the bank. But I'm not in the politics. I think the issue about the business, for example, with the real estate business, we have to push for economic reforms, not just credit, but also, for example, the way the corruption has created delays in lands, in immigration. Every time you see the government gives a reason for delay, it's because somebody is going to collect for it. So we need to reform lands in terms of allowing a quick response for a title. But similarly, we also need to do that for banking. We shouldn't need to wait 6 months for a banker to decide. He should be able to give you an answer in 30 days. And the cost shouldn't be escalated and scaled up because you're getting more money. So those issues, I think we need to push for legislation. And the ideal time is now because, like I've said before, COVID brought clarity. And now we know where we need to tap the leaks, where we need to put the holes, where we need to cover. This banking situation is going to unravel a whole host of things. I don't foresee our
Mhm.
country being able to move forward without a Fair Competition Act. And what that does that mean? It also means that they need the bank, central bank, and the country will need to allow more financial institutions. For example, a mortgage institution that's independent of a bank, and pay cards that are independent of banks, credit credit facilities for cars that is independent of the banks, financial institutions that are structured in certain ways that are not directly under the supervision of the central bank. In fact, even the autonomy of central bank away from government, the bank cannot
Is
act.
important.
Yes, it's very, very critical. We need to revamp the whole Central Bank and Financial Institutions Act to put a firewall between the central bank and government. Government has used the central bank as its last resort to, to push and squeeze the banks to accept the notes so that they can continue borrowing and put us more and more into debt. And this
Yeah.
large, huge public debt is not just international, is also local. So I believe that from here onward, we need to look at a lot of reforms, reforming the central bank, reforming the banks, reforming the fees they charge, reforming the lands department, the immigration department, the business registration. I'll give you an example. The issue you raise is not just one issue. We have a great opportunity in the offshore sector. We have thousands of companies that are registered for flagships. We have thousands of insurance companies, IBCs. All these IBCs, each IBC can be forced to have three directors and somebody in operations. And that means that we can employ about 10,000 people with salaries higher than the ones that the people earn at BPOs. But what happens? We can't have the International Financial Services Commission charging these people 5,000 US to get licensed. How can a Belizean just finish a bachelor's degree come up with 5,000? Only accountants and attorneys now sit on those boards, and they sit on many boards. So it's easy for them to find 5,000 if they're going to make 50,000 or 100,000. But what we need to do is open up that entire offshore and integrate the offshore with the onshore. For example, foreign exchange, Forex, is a larger market than the bond and the stock market. It's huge. huge in terms of capital. Why can't we funnel that capital in onshore by opening and integrating both systems? We can, but we're not doing it. Why? Because then that will wreak havoc on the banking system. That means we have access to foreign exchange. We can choose. We don't have to walk into. We are not forced into the cartel's arms. So what I'm suggesting is that there are ways to skin this cat. We need to open up. We need to let the market run. We need to have fair
Precisely.
competition.
Precisely. And this is basically where we come down on this, Arturo, because at the end of the day, the people of Belize at this particular time need more options than what exist on the table right now. We have the situation, as you have rightly put, of more than 100,000 Belizeans out of work. The country is in a depression, so to speak, as a result of the coronavirus. It has brought clarity, but it has also brought great hardship for many. And without access to capital, there will be no chance for a recovery. Raspato has asked, so what will become of our real estate business? Well,
Well, let me
basically
give
what
you a
has,
good example. Let me give you a good.
go
I'll give
ahead.
you a good example for that person. If we would say to the offshore owner, the person who owns a company in Belize, listen, we will make your personal income tax zero, not your company, the personal. Will tax the company maybe 2% or 6%, or give you an option to do an income tax at 10%. But your personal income tax will be zero. But in order for you to have your tax residence in Belize, you need to buy a 1 million US dollar property, or you need to buy stock or equity or a warrant or a debenture of 1 million US in a company, a Belizean company. What does that mean? It means that many, a large part of the real estate market will be gobbled up by many millionaires who do not want their wealth to disappear, and therefore will make Belize their tax resident vicinity, where they reside. And that is the one simple mechanism that we
Oh,
can
yeah.
legislate. So I'm saying that it is not that we lack creativity, or we lack the ability, or that Belize is really a fantastic place. We're so rich to be so poor. So I'm saying that most of the times it's because the few people who control the system don't want you to do it, because their base changes. They no longer will have their four-footed stool no longer becomes steady for them. But we as a people need to insist to open fair competition, to open the markets, to integrate the offshore with the onshore, and those are the ways I believe that we can defeat the cartel. I know they will resist it, but we must press on.
Definitely. Definitely. Glenis?
Now, at the end of the day, however, what advice would you give to those people who have loans already? Um, let's say because of the corona thing that happened a while ago, I know that, and I can't quote it because I'm not 100% sure. Some banks were given, and I think Scotiabank's uh, policy was very different from the Belize Bank policy. I was trying to get some information. I'm not a banker with Scotia, so I can't tell you much about it. I was trying to research what they did. They waiver payments during this COVID time. Now, I think what Belize Bank did was to give you only 3 months. You could not, after 3 months, you had to start paying back, and there were certain conditions that they had on it. But how do you see the person who's banking now with Scotia, who has opted not to pay for these? For, I think it's since March, not paying their loans, and now having a new person. Do you think now that these people might face changes in?
Well, yes, it is very. They're in a very precarious position, because, as you rightly said, the information that went out is very misleading. For example, DFC said only those who have lost their jobs. So if you were self-employed, you wouldn't qualify, even though, right? You you don't have access to your to funding or to revenue. So
Right.
it's very misleading. And by and large, the reality is that they will send you a demand letter because after 3 months, they will send it out to cover their legal exposure. And so they will insist to move ahead on moving or demanding that you make payment. And if you can't, they will foreclose. One of the things I think you need to do, or people need to do, is go into their bank and ask how they can recapitalize their loan. What is that? Asking the bank to lend you money, meaning you will have to borrow more money to cover the next year of payments, right? And extend your loan onward so that it gives you a year of breathing space. And I believe that negotiation should occur now and in writing. You visit your bank, you
Okay.
listen to what they say, but put it in writing that you want to recapitalize your mortgage, you want to recapitalize your credit facility. Because if you don't do that, once you have the paperwork, then we can pressure government to make a consideration through the central bank and demand recapitalization for loans for up to a year. I'd prefer up to 2 years because I don't believe tourism will be rebounding anytime soon, and it will be a 2 year, at least a 2 year hiatus
Before
in
they.
terms of
Mhm.
normalcy. And in truth, if truth be told, this situation will last at least 7 years. I don't believe whichever government comes into power, they will need
Can't
at
predict.
least 7 years to recoup back to normalcy. So it's a very long-term situation we're in, and I believe that consumers and people who have loans should act immediately. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for them to send you the letter. Go in and ask for a recapitalization immediately and start to negotiate how you and your bank can work out the situation where you don't lose your house, your car, or your assets. Like I've said
Okay.
before, what is needed is reform in terms of Chapter 11, Chapter 7, Chapter 13, new banking legislation is needed to protect the consumer. And
For those who may not
unfortunately,
know what Chapter
the COVID
7, Chapter 11, Chapter 13 is, we're talking about bankruptcy laws that protect you from your creditors, that allows for you to structure your repayments and to protect your assets in that process, which we don't really have in Belize. In fact, in Belize, it is almost an arbitrary thing where the bankers basically seek to put you in a position where you're behind the eight ball, so to speak, as it relates to your balance of payments with your loans and mortgages. And it's been a very predatory practice of the banks to then go in and take assets, which is one of the dangers that we're talking about right now. So I want you, listening audience, to appreciate what Mr. Lizaraga is pointing out, because it is something that is missing, but something that is very needed. And it has to be that the people that we put in the legislature put these things on the front burner as opposed to leaving them absent from the compendium of our legislation to help our people.
Mr. Patio said you must apply for the waiver, but at a one time and a free for all, and was just one payment of the month, not a full month's payment waiver at the Belize Bank.
like I said, it's very misleading. People gave you the impression that you're okay for 6 months, and that's not true. You're not even okay. You're not even okay for 3 months.
Right.
So I'm saying to people that sitting down in the house waiting for somebody to knock on the door to serve you papers is not the solution. You need to get out of
Oh,
your
but
house,
the
go
greatest
to the bank.
indicator of what was taking place was the classifieds in the weekly newspapers. People were still being foreclosed upon March, April, May, and now in June. We're still seeing foreclosures in the newspapers. So we can appreciate that the waiver that they talked about, that they were touting in the beginning, was not real. And we are still faced with that problem because, especially those private sector operators who are dealing with tourism and whose businesses were made to close as a result of the coronavirus. Many of them are finding that their assets are now in peril, that they are not in a position to redeem their assets.
Well, what the COVID coalition did was to help the banks first, and because what they did, they eased the banks in terms of what they were required to hold. They gave them some flexibility, and they also helped the foreign-owned hotels. So really, they did not help the Belizeans. And
Precisely.
as you know that even with the basic thing about the pantry and the food, half of the 100,000 Belizeans got none. But on the much touted help, really only went to the banks and to the foreign hotel.
And I know of some people who got like first 2 weeks and sorry, the first two payments, and then it stopped thereafter, or they got food pantry for two rounds and it stopped again. And so it is a farce. It is a farce out there. It's not everybody who's getting it constantly. So
No, no, Arturo, as it relates to this takeover and the oligopoly that has been put in place, what role would the credit unions play? Because we know that there are certain limitations that the credit unions have to operate within, and they cannot really do as much as banks can. But is there a way for them to expand their role to not necessarily be the XM Bank, or, well, they're not banks at all, but to operate in that capacity? But how could they expand their role to capitalize on basically what's taking place in terms of Belizeans seeking another alternative than the banks to put money and to secure financing?
Well, I would say that there are the credit union. They might, for example, Whole Redeemer Credit Union, I believe should be a bank. They should allow the legislation for this entity to transform itself to a bank. The problem we have is that that those kinds of institutions are made up about from many members. It's not just one key shareholder. And in fact, the people who manage the bank, the board that manages the bank, is not a large shareholder, but represent votes. So that kind of format makes it difficult for it to mount any kind of defense for the people. In fact, you might find out that because of the new changes in the Financial Institutions Act and the regulatory forbearance of the central bank over these institutions, now they're behaving just like banks in terms of their inclination to foreclose. So, because of the penetration of the practices of the central bank within the financial institutions, they are in fact acting like banks without the power and the flexibility of banks. So that we gotten a negative part of banking reflexes rather than having the positive part. So I would think that what we might find out, some of these credit unions might, after COVID, not exist, because a lot of their people or their members will not be able to continue paying. One of the things that we liked about the credit union is the flexibility of the board to tell a borrower, look, we will arrange some kind of financing for you, or we'll change your payment. The way the banking institutions, the Financial Institutions Act and the banking protocols are regulated, it doesn't give the bank any flexibility to recapitalize your loan. And that's why I'm saying that this is something that has to be done across the board by government in a sort of directive to the central bank and to the banks. It has to be legislated, or not, they won't be able to do it. And you can't say, let's leave it to the voluntary interests of the bank to do, because like some of the viewers are saying, they won't do it.
Right.
They want maximum profit, and if that means acquiring your property and selling it cheap, they'll do it.
Precisely, which is the danger that many are seeing with this takeover of Scotia. That this is just another basis upon which Ashcroft and Ashcroft's group of companies will get its hands on assets that they want. And
But
go ahead, Dennis.
but with all this happening, Arthur, we see Mr. Ashcroft coming in, taking over Scotia, having Belize Bank. In about 2 weeks, there is the judgment coming down on what had transpired with BTL. And whether we like it or not, what we're seeing in Belize is that one man has formed a grip over the Belizean people's finances. And whether we want to, and we can all get angry and say, oh, he is doing such and such a thing, but shouldn't it be that government has certain types of laws to regulate how certain people operate? Not because you have the money should you be able to capitalize such a big market share and have the mercy of the Belizean at his disposal, because that is what to me it boils down to. And
Excellent.
then he will
She's right.
set the trend.
You're right.
He will
What
set
it
the
is,
trend.
what you're referring to is antitrust. Government of United States saw in Morgan and in the big companies, the trusts that controlled many businesses as detrimental to public well-being. And what you're referring to is that we need antitrust laws. We need to be able to take them to court. We need antitrust laws against this kind of action, but we also need fair competition laws. That those laws are in place to prevent the control of one man or a group of people controlling everything. But we don't have that. And therefore, we must insist upon our politicians. Because really, Mr. Ashcroft had a collaborator. He could not have gotten $537 million without somebody in government giving it to him. He went into a hotel room and cut a deal and walked out there a very rich man. So I'm saying, regardless of what we might say about him, because he does his spin and he gets his television time and he goes around projecting a certain harmless character. But the fact is, he see people and they work for him. Yeah,
Right.
he is their
Well,
client.
Because we
let's be clear.
should
Let's
not
be clear
forget
about
who
something,
was
Arturo and Glennis. Let's be clear. All right. As a businessman, Ashcroft will do whatever he is allowed to do. Now, he has had a corruptive influence. I will not say he has not, but he has had willing collaborators, as Arturo has said, in the sense that we have seen not only as it relates to him, but with the LPG National Gas Company situation, we have seen where the government of Belize is operating in a way that is contrary to fairness and protection of the consumer. Basically, assisting in putting in place entities that goes against the grain of competition. Now, Ashcroft has basically been systematically allowed to take over industry after industry, sector after sector. He started off with telecommunications back in the 80s, and he has gradually increased his market share in telecommunications to where he has control of both the major companies.
But Arthur, who is to say that he doesn't buy out the government shares and social security shares from the Belcom and gets it back for little something? Who's to say that that deal isn't being cut as we speak?
Well,
Listen,
there's one major factor to that happening right now, because we must remember that the
look,
government of
if they
Belize,
can form, if Said Musa and Lisa Schumann can join the against the people and say yes to Guatemala and form the PUDUP, you tell me that the coalition that we just recently seen would not come about for a constitutional amendment where he gets his way? Please, man, anything is possible in Belize.
well, I'll tell you what, I do not think that the Belizean people will sit idly by and watch that happen. Not after what has transpired. Because to have a constitutional amendment at this time, one of the major legislations blocking democracy in Belize would have to be overturned. That being the cross the floor legislation. Because what will be required then is, for the first time, the opposition will have to vote along with the government to make the numbers for that constitutional amendment to be overturned.
They won't be, but they won't be crossing the floor. They'll be saying welcome to the party, and they'll be hugging up each other across the aisle.
True.
Man, listen to me. As you have said, stranger things have happened.
Okay, guys,
So
let's
we'll look forward to see
take a
if
look
that
at,
one will happen.
let's take a look at some of the comments.
I'm
Okay.
down to 2% of my battery, so I'll have to warn you that you might not be seeing me after 2% disappears.
I hear you.
Oh my.
Thank you.
Okay,
Really
so
quickly.
really quick, Amy Bell Tablata says she has a serious question. What advice do you have to the credit unions? Isn't this a time for them to rebuild?
Yes, I believe that similarly, like building societies, anything that's community-based, we should re-energize those kinds of organizations because it's only the people will help the people. We can't expect somebody else to come from outside to help us. They don't have our interests. So I believe that a lot of effort should be placed, and you should become an active member of your credit union. You should know who is on the board and why they're on the board and who supports those persons on the board and what they're doing, because that is where the control of the credit union is. And most members don't worry about it. They let the board run the credit union as if though it's somebody else's money, as if though they own the business, and they don't. So I'm suggesting that people should become very active in their credit union and become active in the activities of the board.
More comments, Pauline?
Okay, so Bobby Lopez adds Belize needs usury and usury, sorry, and truth in lending laws.
Definitely.
Well, it goes back to antitrust. It goes back to antitrust legislation. It goes back because at the end of the day, usury comes about as a result of collusion where prices are fixed and usually to the detriment of the consumer.
And Curly wants you to explain further.
What exactly?
Explain.
What is exactly you want?
Explain what, Pupa? What should we explain more? The rich get richer and the poor dies.
Poor dies. Point blank.
Point blank.
Yeah, that's basically where it is, because again, with the cost of capital going up and the access to capital being more restricted, it's basically going to be those with the connections who get in. Those without will basically be made to starve. That's the bottom line. So the regular house loan for a young person trying to start life will be difficult. Very, very difficult.
I'd like to thank Mr. Ferguson for his comments. And I also would like to disagree with you, Arthur. We cannot sit in our homes and die slowly. We need to charge a hill.
Oh,
we need to change.
I'm never for staying at home and dying slowly. That's not my mantra.
We have to change as Belizeans to just sit back and try to hope and pray. But we have to become more active in how we demand things from our government and from our representative. We must understand, people, that your representative represents you and your wants and needs, not necessarily their own. And many times they go into cabinet and they decide on your behalf without even having a consultation on how you see things or how you see or what you believe is good for your country. Belizeans have to understand that if we are supposed to make changes, it starts with you and I. We have to make the stand to make the change. And change starts with
stop seeing ourselves as colonial subjects and start seeing ourselves as the bosses of this land. You see, the politicians, we have made the politicians our bosses by default.
And it should have been the other way around.
Acting in our interest.
Bobby says all the quick loan entities charging up to 45% interest.
It's true. It's true.
Wow.
And that we need to prevent, we need to legislate against.
Yes.
That's this capital, credit and capitalization and all the reorganization and the protection to the consumer is should
We have
be
to
the
look into
highlight of
growth.
any new government.
Yes,
But we
totally
need to
agree with
push them.
that point.
We need to
Yes.
write representatives and write them every week. If something irritates us, we need to write them and put it on record and let them know how we feel. I think yes, Facebook is good, but we also have to put it in black and white.
Oh yeah, agreed 100%. 100%.
One of one of the things too, we especially coming out of this COVID time, um, a lot of people who have not been able to work because the business, especially in the tourist section, but in other section, they have cut back. For example, I was talking um, to an employee at a hardware store where she was explaining to me that their hours were cut back. Um, some of the staff members were laid off, and she was saying in times like these, they have, although they're employed, she has become somewhat scared. And as I spoke to her the other day, she was explaining to me, said, I am trying my best, but I come to work with a high stress level because I'm afraid that I may fall victim of the cut that my company now has started. At the end of the day, though, when we see these people in this particular position, and you see that they have these fears, um, and they don't have the power to purchase anymore. They don't have the salaries that they used to have. Ultimately, these same people will find it difficult to even get loans. Um, and at one point or the next, what you will find out that we have not truly addressed the importance of getting people back on the foot, because we have not really taught our people to try to get into jobs that they can develop themselves. We are dependent on many tertiary level work jobs. It is important for us as an economy and as a people to realize that we have to become more productive. We have to look
And
at
self-reliant.
areas where we can become somewhat more self-sufficient as a country. It's the only way that ultimately we will try to muster that the importance, because as some people, there are certain groups of people who, as they see you trying to run for politics or trying to make a country better, they don't look at it as how can I make my community, my country better. It's like, what can you give me? What is there? My home needs repair. Can you give me the funds to repair my house? You We cannot continue this dependency on a politician, because a lot of people will tell you the current area rep for Belmopan, yes, may have done wrong, but he was doing it to help people. You know, help people that way. And people must understand that it becomes worse when we're finding ourselves in this situation, and COVID isn't going away. The thing is, once this airport open, whether we like it or not, we have to understand as Belizeans, we have to be triple times more careful. We have to
Oh yeah.
take more precaution, because now no longer can we, because I'll be honest, there are times when even me, I will say this openly, I I have been having problems with my eyes, and I had to get glasses that I am not too
The Saharan dust, man. The Saharan dust down over your eye.
no, but the glasses itself with the mask, what is happening, it smogged the glasses. I have problems with my eyes, so it's the ultimate fact that you'll find out that people cannot can no longer just sit down and want certain handouts. They have to understand that we are living in a country where now, faced with these realities, we're looking at the states and how much is happening over there. these people are not coming back so easily. And so if we
Yeah.
feel like tourism will be something that will boom quickly,
No, it won't.
just like Belize, in fact, it's worse than that there, because a lot of them are sick.
Yeah.
They don't have jobs, just like here. So
Well,
you won't find them spending. They won't
Florida
be
and Texas
spending.
has seen exponential increases in the number of COVID cases. So, in fact, Florida is now the epicenter.
Yes,
And we get a
Florida
lot of
today
flights out of
had
Miami. We have another
500,
flight out of Texas.
5,000, 5,000 cases in one day.
Yeah.
So whether we want to say, oh, the airport is opening, we will have more jobs, we will get more income, it's a false sense of hope. What will happen is that Belize will have more COVID cases coming in. If we're not careful, it will be spread. So we have to take triple precautions. Um,
But Glenis,
and all our cases
be
that
very
have,
careful. Be very careful how we are speaking on the issue like this. Remember, we don't
yes,
want to be we don't want to be deemed to
carry
create an alarm,
people.
because
No, no,
we don't want to be deemed to be
and
creating an
I
alarm.
agree. But
But
I'm saying to the
these are
fellow
realities that we
Belizeans,
have to look. These are realities we have to look at, because
look at.
the
And
figures are out
not
there.
only that, I'm
The
saying
information is there.
you have to, as Belizean, it is happening. So you have to start to practice more hygienic. Make sure you carry on your sanitizers, your masks. Do what you have to do, and you can't let down your guard now. We have to step it up more than ever, and that it's just a reality. Yes, Bobby Lopez says member-owned CC have a concise and a more understanding of the members' financial reality, but they are limited due to the Credit Union Act trust. It does not allow them to operate as a bank.
Right.
All right.
One of the things that Arturo had articulated earlier was the reality that, as it relates to the ability for persons who are in the private sector to refinance their loans, especially those in the productive sector, they cannot go to the same bank to refinance. And given now that all the banks are either controlled or influenced by the Ashcroft Group, it's going to
Ada,
be difficult.
you're muffled a little bit. You you need to speak up or put your mic a little bit closer. We're not hearing you too well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, better.
All right. What I'm saying is that what Arturo had articulated earlier was that those persons engaged in the productive sector
Mm-hmm.
would be finding it difficult to refinance their loans if there is not an alternative bank outside of the oligopoly, outside of those four banks that are either directly controlled or influenced by the Ashcroft Group. And this is one of the reasons why he's saying that there's a need to ensure that the national bank survives. The national bank is supposed to be there to accommodate the productive sector, because we all appreciate that as it relates to tourism, those who have been able to enjoy the benefit of access to capital in tourism have not really been Belizean.
True.
All right, Ashcroft is a major player in tourism. He owns a number of businesses and resorts in San Pedro and elsewhere, and he's now looking to open a cruise terminal. That's one of his projects that he wants to do. So he's not going to be facilitating the small tourism operator or the small entrepreneur who's seeking to break into the tourism industry. That's not his
Exactly.
interest.
Exactly.
Okay. But we have seen in Belize where tourism is not the answer. We certainly need more long-term investment in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
We need to basically look at light manufacturing and conversion of agricultural goods to secondary goods for export at differentiated prices. And for that, the investor needs time, and the time he will not be getting from the oligopoly and the banks that are part of the banking cartel in Belize. So there is need for alternatives, for viable alternatives outside of the established cartel
Banking, yeah.
for persons to go to, so that our country can actually recover. Nancy
Exactly.
DePaz says those people that depend on tourism need to invest in something else. Tourism will not get back anytime soon, and that's exactly what I'm saying here, Nancy. It's been a shame in this country, year in and year out, that so many fruits go to waste. So many fruits, mangoes, guava, papaya, soursop. In fact,
Or
right now,
pineapple.
soursop is being exported in terms of the pulp, and I commend the farmer Tucan match factory people who have converted that factory into a pulp operation for soursop, which has given us a new market for a
Yeah.
product that has been in Belize for quite some time, that is just now coming into prominence. But we need more of this. We need to expand in these areas, but we need a banking option that will work with the people to have that done. And with this oligopoly that's being set up, that's not going to happen.
Mhm. It won't. And whether we like it or not, we'll see that the marginalization of our Belizean population, especially with small business, these are the ones who will suffer most. And
Precisely.
Belizean ones, because most of the times they find themselves in little crunches where, especially because of the situation we're in right now, these people will have to get some type of break, and we're giving these big financiers tax holidays. We're not giving it to the small man. We're
And this
not
is the thing. There will be no recovery from our economic problems without increased employment. If we cannot
yes.
put our people back to work, we won't get our economy back on track. And in order to get our people back to work, we need for the private sector to be expanded. And for that to happen, there must be greater access to capital and lower cost of capital. And this move by the Ashcroft Group goes totally against those two things happening. So again, we cannot blame Ashcroft for what he's doing. He's doing what he's being
He's a
allowed to do.
businessman.
We have to blame
The
those
gov-
in government and the opposition who is not saying anything about this.
Anything. Yeah. The
Okay.
thing is, the thing is, Ashcroft, I think, plays both sides against the middle. And now they're in a quandary where none of them wants to speak because they have become too dependent on Ashcroft as a banker. And so ultimately, if they believe that if they speak up, they will find themselves in problems where they cannot finance their own um, their own political machinery. At the end of the day, this is where that's something that you have advocated for so long, that these political parties need registration, needs to be registered so that they become more transparent, and so that whatever declaration needs to happen, we have to make sure that they are accountable to the people where they're getting their monies from. That's
And
the
we
bottom
need
line.
campaign finance reform. That is, it's an imperative. We talk about it, but we have not really addressed it in any serious way as a nation. Man,
Hmm.
there should never be a time where you need to spend more than $100,000 on a campaign, on a national campaign in any constituency in Belize. It should be capped at that level, at 100,000. You should have equal access to airtime in any
Hmm.
area. You understand? Which is to be subsidized by the government of Belize, because at the end of the day,
The
the idea
people.
is to have the people be given a chance to make a choice. That's what democracy is about, you see. And if we're going to make this a contest of money, you're never going to get the best. Because at the end of the day, what's going to take place is that the businessman is going to put those upfront that he can control. So they'll push a lot of money behind puppets. And that's what we've been having. And as a result of that, we get poor representation or no representation at all. So, Glennis, we started a bit late tonight. I
Yes.
want to thank our guest, Mr. Arturo Lizarraga from the Belize Better Business Bureau. And certainly, I look
An
forward
excellent,
to having
an
him come back
excellent job
again.
he did explaining to us, and maybe we can have him back real soon We ask our viewing audience to keep a close eye on your news, understand what is happening, and if you have any questions, don't be afraid to submit your questions, even if it's ahead of time. Remember,
I have a
Belize.
I have a specific request to those living in Bongapan who may not be registered in Bongapan, but who have been in Bongapan for the past 2 months. The transfer period starts on the 1st of July for you to be able to vote where you live. I'm inviting you, people of Bongapan, who want to see change, to visit the Election and Boundaries Department in Bongapan and transfer to where you now live. It is time for us to make meaningful change in Bongapan. The election should be coming sometime after the redistricting case is over. And we would want to ensure that we have great voter turnout in the next election. It is time to make meaningful change in Bongapan.
And with that said, we will any closing anything. Oh, and also something we have to do. Maybe next week we have to make sure that we address our Spanish speaking audience. We have not been doing that for a
See,
while, and we
discúlpeme,
have to.
es mi culpa.
So we have to look back at that too and get some of our guests who can speak Spanish so that people can understand what is happening. We're asking our viewing audience to stay tuned, to stay focused, to stay safe.
Stay safe.
Belize and beyond. Thank you for taking time out tonight and for listening to us. Make sure that you give us your feedback. Remember, we are not only here on Facebook, we are also on YouTube. So, with that said, thank you very, very much. Thank you for joining us. See you next week at the same time. Otter, see you soon. Take
Good
care.
night.
Good night.
Thank you.